Well, are you? Are you hard enough? Call me to join what I promise you will be a spirited debate and no shortage of material. I'll chair that child sex abuse inquiry. There's nobody going to shut me up. Neither will I take off for New Zealand in the middle of it. And you don't even have to pay me £500,000 a year for doing it. I've been a victim of child sexual abuse. I've sat in Parliament with child sex abusers. I'm ready. Tell that Keith Vaz. He knows a thing or two. Tell that Keith Vaz that I'm prepared to take on the mantle. That and much more on the mother of all talk shows. What a shambles it is everywhere. What a shambles in the child sex inquiry. What a shambles in the appointment of Shami Chakrabarti as a peer. She's practically the only person in the House of Lords that's worthy of the name. Baroness or lady. It's all a pile of crock, as you know, the House of Lords. But if you're going to have a House of Lords, don't you want somebody like her in it? And the Zionist movement is out and up in arms. I'm just looking at them on the screen, filling every screen on every station. It's an absolute scandal and disgrace. Mind you, they're still gunning for poor Jeremy Corbyn, even though he trounced Mr. Owen Smith in the party's first hustings and debate last evening in Cardiff, of whom it should be said, we're still looking for Owen Smith. It's a kind of all points alert. We've tried his office. We've tried his mobile. We've tried his parliamentary office. We've tried his campaign. We've tried through Twitter. We've tried through Facebook. We've tried everywhere. But I tell you what, Owen, you can run, but you can't hide. And if I don't find you, that's not going to stop me talking about you. So you would be far better turning up to talk back. But as you haven't, let me say that you're not fit to tie Jeremy Corbyn's bootlaces. And everyone who watched the debate last evening now knows that to be true if they didn't before. Mr. Pfizer man was limp, to say the least. He was utterly unconvincing, unpersuasive, a second-rate PR man. And if the court, as it may well do, I believe it will do on Monday, finds that Labour has unlawfully banned 130,000 members, most of them Corbyn supporters, from voting in the leadership, if the court opines on Monday that these members, 130,000 of them, must be allowed to vote, then your tea is out, Mr. Pfizer. Your tea is out to the tune of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of votes. So maybe you should think about chucking it, unless, of course, your purpose in standing is not actually to win, for winning was never on the cards, but as a precursor to something else. And if you were here in front of me, I would ask you directly, is there going to be a breakaway by the Blairites? Yes, the Blairites. Is there going to be a breakaway by the Blairites after the Labour leadership election? And I'd look into his eyes if he had the courage to be here, and I'd be able to tell you whether his answer was truthful or not. But if there's one party in a bigger mess than the Labour Party, it has to be UKIP. Just at the point of victory in the referendum in June, UKIP began to disintegrate. Nigel Farage immediately quit, and a donkey derby of unknowns lined up at the starting line to run to become the new leader of the UKIP, which on the face of it had the ball at its feet, and an open goal in front of it, and it's shot the ball into its own net. One by one, the Donkey Derby have fallen away or been banned by the stewards before the race even got underway, including, of course, the favourite, a Mr. Wolf, who's so impressive a politician, he first of all allowed his party membership to lapse, secondly was late with his application, 17 minutes beyond the deadline, and thirdly forgot to mention that he'd been done for drink driving just a couple of years before, and he forgot to mention that when he was running for police commissioner, wearing the UKIP colours. But he seemed to be the only lad or lass in the race that was capable of being the leader of the UKIP. Now he's been ruled out. The stewards' inquiry has banned him. So he's thinking about maybe a breakaway. So is Aaron Banks, the man with the money. So might be Nigel Farage. But first they're going to try and convene an extraordinary emergency general meeting of UKIP to sack, I'm not making this up, to sack their national executive. And if they fail, they may well set up a new party. So parties are imploding all over the place. So is the presidential campaign of Donald J. Trump. It must. I mean, even the Americans are not stupid enough to give their presidential vote to a man who's stark, raving bonkers, are they? I'll be talking to his latest biographer, man who got up close and personal with Donald Trump, and it ain't a pretty sight, you know. When he ordered that baby to be kicked out of one of his rallies, I knew this man's not serious. Candidates are supposed to kiss babies, not kick them out because they're crying. How's that for empathy? But then, empathy was never Trump's strong suit. Neither was a care for women, except as eye candy and trophies on his arms. He has no respect for women. He has no respect for children. He has no respect for black people. He has no respect for Hispanic people. He has no respect for Muslim people. How's he going to win the election? He has insulted just about every voter in America, except one group, the angry white men in the Midwest, in the Rust Belt, in the post-industrial disaster areas that have been laid waste by the Clintons and their free trade policies. The NAFTA destroyed American industry, destroyed factory after factory, workshop after workshop, and mill after mill. If it wasn't for the fact that Donald Trump was up against the most monstrous woman in America, Hillary Clinton, well, we could stop talking about the American presidential election because it would be obvious that nobody in their right mind is going to vote for Trump. But I'll tell you what, there's millions and millions of people who are not going to vote for Hillary Clinton in any circumstances. And if I was in America, I'd be one of them. As I've said before, I'm supporting Dr. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, because I could not cast a ballot for either one of these monsters. So I want to know what you think about that. We're going to talk about all these issues and more. We're going to talk about the economy, about the British political scene, about the US political scene, and anything else that breaks in the course of the evening. Because, hey, when I'm here on a Friday night, it's never dull. It's the mother of all talk shows. David Coburn is a UKIP member of the European Parliament, the only one in Scotland. He's a man not afraid to stand up for himself. I wonder where he stands in the imbroglio that has become his party, UKIP. Let's find out. David, welcome to the show.
Hello, George. Nice to hear from you again.
And you, it's a rumble, all right. Where do you stand in it all?
Well, I was supporting Mr. Wolf. I stood aside, as many people did, to let him run. And then all sorts of strange things seemed to happen. First, they couldn't find the fact he paid money in. Then they had a problem. He was trying to get his application in, and he was on the phone to them before the actual deadline. And then, of course, it wasn't going through, and then it didn't work, etc., etc. And it was, ridiculous. They could have opened it a little longer, because earlier on, last year, I believe, the NEC, when they were having the election for themselves, they extended the deadline because they had mechanical faults on the computer. So isn't that strange? Yet they weren't willing to extend it for anybody else. And two of the people who are standing against him are quite happy to have have him on the list. So this is just being childish.
What about the fact that he forgot he'd been done for drunk driving?
Well, I believe that's expended now. But yes, that wasn't a fine moment. But it's an old thing. I don't think he'd be the first person who's been caught doing that.
No, but he'd be the first person trying to be. He'd be the first person trying to be a police commissioner without declaring it.
Well, yes. Well,
maybe not, David. Maybe not.
I mean, who knows, George? There, but for the grace of God, go I.
Well, not I, because I'm not a practitioner of the hard stuff, as you know. But
no, absolutely.
But let's just look at the politics behind this.
Yes.
Why does Nigel Farage keep resigning? Why? He had the ball. He had the ball at his feet. He had the ball at his feet. The wing. He had a clear run in on goal, and he takes off and plunges the party into all this.
Well, I think that he needed a rest. He's been through a hell of a lot, as you well know yourself. You do a lot of stuff in your own, off your own bat, and you know how tough that is. When you're running a small party or smaller party than the others, you don't have as many people to help you. So it's a tough gig. You know as well as I do. And I'm doing up in Scotland. That's not easy. You've done various campaigns yourself. You've probably found it's quite stressful.
It is, but he's younger than me, and he is, of course, head and shoulders above the rest of them in UKIP. That's obvious. I mean, it's a donkey derby that he's left in his wake.
Oh, I don't know about donkey derby, but I think the people who are standing at the moment, I think that there would have been a broader number of people standing had Stephen not been standing. I think a lot of people, quite talented people, stood aside because they felt that, for the good of the party. I know I did. I was going to stand, and I thought, we can't all be standing. Someone's got to step aside. So, I'm a believer in, country, party, self last. So I stood aside. Now, I wouldn't have done that if I'd known he wasn't standing. And I think being petty about these things is just ridiculous, and that's what's been happening.
Yeah. So what happens now? Are they going to go for this EGM?
Yes, I think we're going to have an EGM. The NEC needs to be changed. I think we're going to go along a more sort of, how shall we call it, modern way of doing things. We want to do a bit like the Five-Star movement in Italy, whereby, we have, asking the members what they want and doing electronic voting. I mean, it's very odd. We've got a system at the moment where people put their name in, they write 120 words, they have a photograph that's taken when they left the Navy in World War II, and, you get some very bizarre results. And it's only people who are willing to be able to spend one day a month sitting in London chewing the cud. It really isn't the best way to run a modern political party. You've got to respond quickly, as you well know, to the press. It's got to be run in a more modern way. Our idea, and I think it's a good one, is that we should be having a more democratic method of doing it, that we ask the members what they want and the regular referenda to see what the members actually want. And that's a much better way than having a bunch of guys sitting in a room, a smoky room, spending all day eating sandwiches.
Will that be enough to halt the leadership election?
I'm not sure about that, to be honest. I think it probably may well rumble on, although I would think it would be in the best interest of the NEC that they reopen the ballot, and it wouldn't be too difficult to do, and it would assuage a lot of people who are very, very angry about this. I mean, nobody can say that if you put one of the chaps who's the sort of lead candidate, keep him off on a technicality, you can't really say that the person who wins is going to have any sort of mandate. People will continually snipe about it. So it would be childish to keep the man off the ballot when quite clear he was trying to get the technicals through. But, I mean, you probably have my age group, George, that pressing buttons on computers, things don't always happen the way you wish them to. I mean,
it's a stupid way to run a party, saying that the favourite is ruled out because his form didn't come out the printer.
My feelings entirely. I mean, and he has photographs to show that he was actually doing it. So, I mean, there is some very bizarre things going on.
Sure. But where does it all, David? Where does all this end? Does it end like the Labour Party imbroglio may very well end in a division,
no, I don't think
in
so.
a split?
No, I think the vast majority of people are in agreement. I think there are some factions on the NEC that really have been causing a lot of trouble for both Nigel, and I think he's expressed himself pretty clearly on this. Trying to micromanage the way things are done, and he says it's not fit for purpose. And who am I to argue with a man who did more than Lenin and Trotsky for revolution? Who am I to argue with him?
Well, that's a given. He has always felt that the party was too difficult to manage. Years ago, I had this conversation with him. Too difficult and too old-fashioned and cramping his style. So why doesn't he just, him and Aaron Banks and yourself, why don't you just set up something new?
Oh, no, we're UKIP through and through. And we're going to try and sort things out. It's a much better way to deal with things. I think people have been very loyal. We're going to make sure we try and sort it out. The vast majority of people want a change of the way things are run. We have an EGM, perfectly good way of deciding what people really want. If they think that the NEC have been acting in a way that's not the best interest of the party, they can say so and change the whole system around.
And when will this happen?
We'll do.
When will this happen, David?
Well, we're collecting the signatures now. It should happen, well, I think within a month or so, end of August, something like that, beginning of September, then we should have it all sorted out. We'll have an EGM and decide how the party moves forward. It's time it was modernised. We're trying to do it before, and Nigel's desperately been trying to do it. And I have seen, myself, five-star movement in Italy as an anti-corruption movement. I think something that you quite enjoy. They're, anti-corruption. They want the European Union to interfere less in the affairs of Italian citizens. And their movement is done by direct democracy. And they have regular.
Yeah. No, I get that. And that is, I think, the future. So it's going to be a long, hot summer for the UKIP. David, cancel the beach.
Well, I will
cancel the summer holiday.
I'm not happy.
Just unpack the suitcase, my friend, because it's going to be a busy summer instead. That was David Coburn, the UKIP MEP for Scotland, talking not about the troubles in the Labour Party, though it might have sounded a little bit familiar at some points, but about the internal problems in UKIP. So we've got two of Britain's big four parties, if the Liberal Democrats can any longer be called part of the big four, but certainly it's Britain's third biggest party, UKIP, in terms of votes. 4 million voters, one MP. Didn't even get on to him. He's a rebel too. So if you are interested in, or maybe even a member of the UKIP, then give me a call. Coming up later in the programme, we're talking to the biographer of Donald Trump. We're still hoping. I can see a forlorn look in my producer's eye. We're still hoping to find Owen Smith. It's like that Where's Wally? You know the Where's Wally book? Those of you who've got young kids will know that you look and you look and you look, but eventually you do find the Wally, and we're looking for the Wally Owen Smith, and if we get him before the end, then we'll let you know. David is the first caller, and he's on the line from London, so let's hear from him. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, George. Just to let you know that, if you didn't know, that I'm in the Labour Party, and the Labour South, which is Emily Thornberry's ward, we voted 2-1 in favour of Jeremy Corbyn.
Good, and because the London results have been a bit patchy.
That's right.
Seems the London Labour Party isn't all that representative of the party in the country.
Well, your old constituency in Bethnal Green, they voted obviously for Owen Smith, which is a shock to the system.
Apparently, it wasn't a shock to me. They are very, very right wing. It's one of the reasons why we did so well there. Yeah,
yeah, of course. But what I wanted to ask you is your advice. At the Momentum meeting recently, I quoted you and said, "If we stop running, they can't chase us."
Yep.
That's what George Galloway said. So I quoted you, and Momentum said we don't have no policy on deselection. Now, I think we'll win. I think Jeremy will win. Now, but what happens is afterwards. Now, what I'm worried about Jeremy is he's too nice. Me and you, I took my lead from you actually to argue and say, look, I don't know enough about war, but I know that you don't let the enemy pick the ground for battle, and he did that, and John McDonnell did that, and I respect their view, but I think they were wrong. Now, what I'm really worried about is that when we do win, he'll offer another olive branch to the warmongers and the Blairites. What do you think we should do? Should we go independent and just deselect anyway, or try to deselect, or should we just keep on going with the party line? A little bit like the Sanders thing, where the Sanders supporters were actually arguing against their own man because they were so sick of Hillary Clinton. What do you think we should do? I mean, obviously we need you in the Labour Party. We need some politicians with some backbone for a change. What do you think we should do? Should we just toe the line? Because I do fear that Jeremy is such a nice guy, and he is, that he's not going to, actually attack them.
David, he is a nice guy, and that's one of the reasons why he became the leader of the Labour Party. He didn't have people who disliked him, hated him. He got even people miles away from him politically to nominate him, or he wouldn't even have been on the ballot paper. And that's because he was nice, because nobody disliked Jeremy Corbyn. A lot of them dislike him now, but they hadn't had reason to hate him in the past, and so people like Margaret Beckett and others gave him their nominations to get him on the ballot in the first place. So we shouldn't underestimate the value of being nice, and it got him this far. It got him not just one, but I think we agree he's on the verge of a second landslide victory. It depends. My answer to your question would depend on what the Blairites are going to do. If they are going to continue in the next 12 months as they have in the last 10 months, that's intolerable, and something will have to be done. Some example will have to be made of at least the worst of the offenders, the Jamie Reeds, the Wes Streetings, the Mike Gapes, the Jez Phillips, and I could go on, but you get the picture. The rent-a-mouths that are on every station, every paper, and but to use their own words, stabbing Jeremy Corbyn in the front, side and back. If they're going to continue for another 12 months and then have another go 12 months from now, when they have again further damaged the Labour brand and its opinion poll standing, no, they have to go. Someone would have to decide to make an example of these people. People like me and Ken Livingstone have to be reinstated into the Labour Party. And I think that Labour needs, I mean, sticking out a mile, reinstate me into the Scottish Labour Party and set me loose on the SNP. It's kind of a no-brainer. But
well, that's what they need. They need stuff. That's exactly right. That's what Scottish Labour need.
They certainly do. But let's not get sidetracked into that. The answer to your question it lies in a constitutional dichotomy between those who believe that MPs are something special and those who believe that MPs are elected because of the party label that is attached to them. And I belong to the latter school. Yeah. I'm ready to say to you now that 90%, maybe 99% of all MPs are only there because they were the Labour candidate, or for that matter, the Conservative candidate. Not 1%, not more than 1%, are elected on a personal basis. In fact, I'm an exception. I was twice elected outside of the party political system. But most MPs are not even legends in their own street. And if they were to stand as independents against a Labour candidate, well, they might ruin it the first time round. They wouldn't win, and they would never be heard of again. So I believe that MPs are the representatives of the Labour movement in Parliament for such and such an area. And as such, the movement has the right to remove them any time it likes. It's not a job for
we're
life.
500,000 people now, so we are a real movement.
Exactly. You're not short of people you can put up. I mean, how bad do you have to be? 172. We've had wooden posts on this show.
George, let me tell you very quickly, very beautiful story. All the people got up who were arguing for Jeremy, or the odd occasional one against, they were all pretty well versed in speaking and what have you. But the two people that really blew the house away, blew the meeting away, were two young black women, independently, working class black women, arguing to support Jeremy, and they got the biggest cheer out of everybody because they were genuine people just wanting to have some kind of anti-austerity, anti-racist agenda, and they were brilliant, and they got the biggest clap out of everybody.
Yeah, get them into Parliament.
Yes.
Instead of some of these billionairesses round your way up in Islington. David, thanks. That's been a great call. That was David in London. Let's hear from Tarek in Bradford. Tarek.
Hey, George, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. I was in Bradford with my film the other night. Were you there?
Oh, I missed it, George. The thing was a family. I went to buy a new sofa.
It was a pity. It was standing room only. It was a wonderful night.
Missed it. Anyway,
go ahead.
Two things I want to talk about, George. Yesterday, the performance of Owen Smith. What an absolutely dire performance.
It was pretty pathetic, I must say.
It was. I mean, the lies came out of the mouth. He says to Jeremy, I wasn't involved in any coup. And to quote John Mann, which he said, I was approached 6 months ago to back Owen Smith. To
support Owen Smith, yeah.
That's right.
And Smith then said he's a liar, and so Mann gave chapter and verse. I mean, say what you like about John Mann. He's not going to be called a liar without answering.
No, not in public, not because he's a Yorkshire guy. And Yorkshire guys, they don't like to be called liars in public.
No.
But it was just absolutely horrific. And if that's the best that the Blairites...
But here's the rub, Tarek, because we know that isn't the best. So why is he the candidate? What is this all about? Where are the front rank Blairites? Where is Chuka Omona? Where is Dan Jarvis? Where is Yvette Cooper? Where is Liz Kendall? I could go on. Andy Burnham remained loyal, so I'm not going to ask that of him. But all these other people that resigned or refused to go on the front bench that are obviously far more recognisable figures than Owen Smith, why aren't they running for the leadership?
Exactly. I mean, to be honest, they put Owen Smith up, but we all know the 172 MPs, they want the ABC, anyone but Corbyn.
Yeah.
And the members want something different. And that's the bottom line. You know, we're sick and tired of it, of the elitist controlling. Now we've got the best person in charge, in my opinion, and we're going to put him back there. So I'm absolutely over the moon. And apparently, there's with the PLP coup plotters, they're looking to Owen Smith to pull out of this leadership race.
He'll pull out. He will pull out on Monday if the court reinstates the 130,000 members. 130,000 members that were carved out.
I hope he doesn't, and I hope to God we know we see, and we can. It'll be just absolutely embarrassing for them for the PLP. But
okay,
anyway, that's what
Tarek, always a pleasure to hear from you. I've got to press on. We'll definitely get on. Let me read some tweets and texts. Crumbs says, Owen Smith sounded like a Welsh Tony Blair in the leadership debate. He even mimicked Blair's body language. Sickening. I see him as more Alan Partridge, actually. I mean, Blair could fake the sincerity in the Bob Monkhouse way, but Smith can't actually fake the sincerity. He really is an Alan Partridge figure for me. Colin says, George, Owen Smith in the debate with Jeremy kept saying, "Let me be clear," which usually means, let me waffle on until your eyes glaze over. Indeed. And David says, UKIP are a rucksack for the Conservatives. They were never meant to be a party of power. And Raves says, the plotters learnt from the SDP. They want to split, but they can't without the Labour brand. Plans afoot to steal it. And Tarek says, one of the reasons why I love Fridays, I can listen to George Galloway. Thank you very much indeed for that, Tarek. Now, I'm in Liverpool on Sunday night, so I better hear from Mark, who's also in Liverpool. Go ahead, Mark.
Hello, George. You okay, mate?
I'm okay. We had a rumble last week, as I recall.
Yeah, I enjoyed that, mate. I really enjoyed that.
It's gone viral, you saying that you never read the papers except when you're in prison.
Yeah, and well, I just want to explain something about that. Thank you, George, for the cue in there. The main reason I get the Times right is because the amount of reading material in it. Now, that it's easier over a week, you see, so you get your telly guide, you get your arts review, you get blah, blah, you can spread it out among the lads. So there's that much reading material in it. That's the main attraction of the Sunday Times, actually.
That's a fair enough point. If I was in prison, I think I might follow your example. But as I'm not, I stay clear of the Sunday Times and all of Mr. Murdoch's papers.
Yeah, listen, I feel bad about it myself. Don't think I don't. Anyway, back to tonight, George.
Yes.
Listen, going on about Owen Smith, right, I'm going to have a little bit of beef with you here. Talking about Owen Smith, right, well, let's have it right. Why would any of them come on? After last week's debacle, when you got Andrew Slaughter on and carried on going on about Palestine, all good points, everything we agree with on you, George, but why would someone come on, mate?
Well, if they want to speak to my large audience, they would come on. And if they're hoping to face the Conservatives in Parliament, they've got to be able to face a proper interview with somebody who knows what they're talking about, don't they?
Yeah, I know that. I just thought it was a missed opportunity, and I told you that last week. But about the debate on the telly, I thought Smith gave an okay performance.
Well, you're the only man to think that. The Daily Mirror. Now, maybe you're not in prison at the moment, so maybe you don't read the Daily Mirror either, but the Daily Mirror had a poll after it. 10% thought Owen had won and 90% thought Corbyn had won. So you're a bit lonely there, Mark.
Yeah, but you know what I'm starting to get worried about, mate? And I mean this now, is all this, everything feels so divisive. Everything feels like it's a case of one-upmanship. And if we don't feel like, don't forget, I've told you, my allegiance and my politics are near enough to you and Jeremy Corbyn and to anyone else. But I just don't like the vibe that's going round. Now, last night, did you see how many times Owen Smith and Jeremy agreed? They agreed on loads of things.
Why is he standing against them, then?
Yeah, because there's a difference. He doesn't think he can win. That's all it is, George.
But why would Smith... What credentials has Smith got that are better than Corbyn's for winning? Certainly not winning elections or referendums. He lost the referendum. He lost a by-election to an independent candidate. He denounced the independent candidate, who he now praises. I mean, this man is all over the place, Mark. He's Mr. Flip-Flop.
Listen, George, I'm going to agree. It's disappointing that he's the one who's come out of the crowd. But at the end of the day, George, come on, mates. I want you to think about this a sec. For one, he's not a right-winger. He might be right-wing within a Labour setting, but to just put on that right-wing, it's a horrible tag to put someone in the Labour Party.
He's a Blairite.
Oh, come on, he's not, George.
Oh, come on.
Oh, come on, mate.
Well, I don't think many people in Liverpool agree with you. I'll be there in the city on Sunday night. I hope you come and see me at Fact at the cinema, and we can continue this then. But thanks very much for that call. Let's hear from George in Preston. Go ahead, George.
Hi, George. How you doing?
Good. Spirited discussion tonight. Go ahead.
It certainly is. I just wanted to respond to these allegations about Jeremy Corbyn and what's been going on in the Labour Party. I'm 17 years old, and I joined the Labour Party last year because of Jeremy Corbyn.
Did you say you're 17 years old?
Yes.
My goodness, you've got such aplomb, such gravitas. I'm astounded. Go ahead. You've got a future, I could tell that already, George. Go ahead.
Well, I want to get into politics myself. Well, anyway, I just want to reflect on the fractions that are plotting against him. It was quite amusing to see Owen Smith was saying, well, I agree with you on that, Jeremy, and Jeremy said, well, why did you resign?
Exactly.
You know, that's exactly the point. You know, if they believe in Jeremy's policies and they believe in his politics, why would you resign? It's like resigning from a job that you like, but you just don't like your boss that much. You know,
I should have made that point to the last caller. He thinks that he'd be a better leader, so he's running for leader. But what's the reason why he resigned from the shadow cabinet? If he agreed with the politics of the leader, why did he leave the shadow cabinet? Answer came there none.
I know. I can't think of any reasons why he would do it other than the fact that the Blairite fractions in the party that have always been there were scared as hell last September when Corbyn came into power, and they thought, oh my God, we've got a Trotskyist socialist in power, you know, our jobs are going to not be safe, and they've been revolting against him. I've got no doubt they've started ever since he was elected in September, and, you know, I think he was just kind of swept away in all of this hysteria. And when he actually started, I think now when he started to think about it, he's probably thinking, you know what, me and Jeremy actually do agree on some points.
I don't think so. I think he's making that up. I don't think he agrees with Jeremy Corbyn on much. Yeah, but he knows that it's a political suicide to actually state what his real politics are. Georgie, thanks for calling. Don't be a stranger. Let's hear from Ray, my old pal in the valleys in Pontypridd. Ray, don't tell me you've been seduced by the valleys lilt of Owen Smith.
Give me strength, George. Give me strength. Listen, George, can you explain something to me? You are saying, and I believe also, that he's a Blairite.
Yep.
Now, why is he espousing all these so-called left-wing statements, policies, whatever, and saying that this hero is Nye Bevan?
Yeah, but if you believe that, Ray, you believe anything, surely.
I don't believe it, George.
No, but if the people believed it, they'd believe anything. I've got a bridge I could sell them here, just down by the Thames.
Years to Nye Bevan what piles is to Frankie Dettori. Right?
Yes.
Now, what is the plan here, George? He's backed by the Prince of Darkness and Campbell, isn't he?
Yes, oh yes. They're pulling all the strings.
What is the plan then? Because he wouldn't be putting... This is nothing they would say, is it?
Well, I tell you, I've already said it, so I'm not giving any games away. I believe that they will break away from Labour and sit as an independent group of MPs in Parliament, and will seek to catch the Speaker's eye as the principal opposition. They will seek to get the title of leader of the opposition for whoever is their leader, and it definitely won't be Owen Smith. They'll try to get the millions of pounds of short money that currently goes to Jeremy Corbyn in the shadow cabinet, and then we'd have effectively Jeremy Corbyn leading the Labour Party in the country, but not being the leader of the opposition and not being the man at the dispatch box every Wednesday at Prime Minister's Questions. I think that's their game.
All right, I see now. Hey, George?
Yes, Ray.
I hope we get him Paul Pogba by Monday.
Well, let's say that again, Ray.
I hope we get him Paul Pogba to Man United by Monday.
I hope so, but
he's in America now on holiday. And
he seems to take an awful lot of holidays. It's remarkable that when somebody's trying to pay £105 million for you, you're not available on the phone because you're on holiday. Yeah. Look, I hope he comes. I think he'll make a significant addition, but I don't think he's worth £105 million, especially that we had him for nothing and let him go.
Do you think the Premier League will implode just like the bankers? It's getting obscene, George, isn't it?
I was at the Theatre of Dreams the other day, and I took, by the grace of God, I have 3 sons. Yeah. I took them into the mega store. Yeah. Boy, I'm going to have to work hard to make up that hole in my credit card at the end of it. It is capitalism red in tooth and claw.
There's
Ray,
no money about though, George.
There is. Well, at least there's credit cards, put it that way. Oh. Look, Ray, thanks very much for the call and that wonderful segue into the megastore at Old Trafford, where I was almost in tears, actually, when I handed over my credit card to pay the bill. It's not that I mean, but of course, when you've got 3 kids, you've got to buy 3 of everything. 3 footballs, 3 tops, 3 shorts, 3 socks, 3 shin pads. I'm not joking. 3 shin pads, 3 tops, tracksuit tops, boots. I tell you what, it's like a mortgage going into the megastore at Manchester United. But the boys were happy, so there you go. So look, this is the mother of all talk shows. I really want to get back to the culture of callers, because I've been skimming the YouTube for some of my classic encounters in the old TalkSport days, and really, I'd love to replicate them. It's all very well hearing from me. It's all very well hearing from the occasional expert, but it's better hearing from you, and at least an argument or a rumble between you and me. So come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. Hillary caused massive poverty in already poor Haiti by lowering the minimum wage, says Stephen. Now, the governor of the Bank of England is nervous that, for reasons he attributes to the Brexit decision of the British people in June, that such is the lack of certainty, in fact, heavy uncertainty facing the British economy, that extraordinary measures were necessary to try and avoid a slump back into recession. And so the bank cut its rates to the lowest level since its foundation around the middle of the 17th century. So that's a long time ago. And I wanted to have someone on the show that could talk us through, who talks a plain person's language. And she does. She's Vicky Price. She is a very prominent economist and former joint head of the UK government's economic service, and she's been good enough to join us from holiday. Vicky, thanks for that.
Not at all. Good evening.
Good evening. Now tell me, what's the main reason, you think, for this cut to 0.25% in Britain's interest rates?
Well, the main thing that's been going on, of course, is that we've been waiting for some of the sort of data to come through to see whether indeed the economy was slowing down as people had been worried might happen after the Brexit vote. The truth is that quite a lot of the official statistics are due to come out over the next few months, but there have been a lot of indications that indeed the slowdown is very fast. When you look at survey data that's come through, when you look at the Purchasing Managers Index, this is what people who are commenting on what's happening in their own businesses in terms of orders, you can just see that those are declining very substantially. And we've seen quite a lot of regional data as well coming through, which suggests that things are perhaps turning downwards rather fast. So the Bank of England had to do something. It had already said it would. It didn't cut rates back in July. It had to do something now. in order to avoid a recession from appearing. And that's basically where we are now. And the interest rate decline, although small, is only part of a bigger package. They've unleashed all sorts of extra liquidity into the economy and hope that that will end up being lent to SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, and hopefully, therefore, encourage firms to spend, recruit, rather than cut back, which they would otherwise do.
Why do we have to hope that liquidity that we are giving to the banks might end up in the hands of someone who might do something productive with it?
You're absolutely right in asking that question. That's so far quite a lot of what has been going on in terms of extra liquidity that the Bank of England has already put into the banks has not necessarily been translated into a lot more lending, but what we might have seen otherwise probably would have been a fall in lending, a rather faster fall in lending than what we've seen so far. So, in other words, you always have to wonder what will have happened if that liquidity wasn't there. In other words, you might have ended up with a considerably worse situation than where we are now. And the truth is that the economy was doing rather well until the middle of the year. In other words, a lot of it was finding its way into firms and also consumers, and that was keeping us going. And the question now is, will that continue? Will firms still want to borrow? Will consumer confidence stay high? The truth is that all that has collapsed. So business confidence has dropped very significantly. Consumer confidence has dropped. What we're seeing in terms of output in services, construction and manufacturing and orders as well suggests that things are turning down. So there is an even more imperative reason for making sure that that funding is there and that firms feel they can go to the banks and get that money. It's there, but now businesses need to feel that they can go and ask for it, and the Bank of England wants to make sure that they get it. Now the question is, will they? Big question mark. I think you're quite right to be asking.
What I mean, at the risk, heaven forfend, of being populist, let me just put this point. If the Bank of England printed this money and gave it to every old age pensioner in the country, the vast majority of it would be spent locally, and it would kickstart economic activity here and now. Or how about this one, Vicky? I really wanted to run this one past you. If the Bank of England paid off everybody's mortgage, there would have to be compensation for those that don't have mortgages and so on. But let's just say, if they paid off everybody's mortgage, the money would still go to the banks and the building societies, so their balances would not be affected. But the people who no longer had a mortgage to pay would have hundreds, some of them thousands, of pounds every month to spend. Would that not be a more directly effective way of injecting demand into the economy?
Oh, that is certainly one way of doing it, but of course somebody would have to take the sort of burden of, who is it who actually gets the mortgage repaid to them? That would be a bank anyway. So you're doing more or less the same thing. You're basically putting a lot more liquidity into the banking system, whether you do it through paying everyone's mortgage or whether you do it by relaxing capital requirements for banks, which actually the Bank of England has done, or whether you lend very, very cheaply to the banks. So it's more or less the same thing.
Except the person that would otherwise be paying the mortgage would then have that cash to spend.
Well, that is true, but of course mortgage rates have been reduced quite significantly, as we know, and that burden has gone down very significantly. But yes, you could do it that way. You could cut VAT. You could issue helicopter money. You can just go and give everyone a certain amount in their pocket or a cheque that they can spend. One small problem about this is that people will go out and spend it, and of course we tend to import an awful lot of the things that we buy in shops. So a lot of it leaks out of the economy. Whereas this way, if you lend to firms who are going to actually start spending it in terms of investment and employment, then you are much more likely to keep that money into your economy than would otherwise be the case. But yes, there are all sorts of ways of doing it, and I suspect we are going to have a reflationary budget in the autumn, which is going to do a little bit of what you're suggesting. Not necessarily pay mortgages, but certainly end up with more money in people's pockets. And I think that is almost certainly going to be the case because the economy will not be showing huge signs of recovery by then.
And do you think that will be enough, Vicky, or are we headed back to recession, in your view?
Well, what the Bank of England has said, and actually it's on the optimistic side, is that we are going to avoid the recession because of what they've done by lowering rates and hopefully increasing confidence that the money is there for businesses and households. Although we will see no growth or very little growth in the second half of this year, we will avoid an actual recession. Other economists don't really think that. The Bank of England itself, despite its forecast, has now said that they may be cutting rates even further in the future. And
there's not much left to cut.
That's quite right. But of course, what they're doing additionally is that they are being themselves involved in buying up bonds in the markets and putting more money in the economy. They've talked about 60 billion extra money in the sense of the banks selling their in the secondary market bonds that they have, government bonds they have, and also buying directly corporate bonds. So firms that want to raise some money can get it straight from the bank. So yes, the interest rate cuts are small, and yes, lots of people are going to suffer, like savers and pensioners. But what they're doing is also a lot of extra things to prevent the economy from slowing down too fast. And that can only be good news in terms of employment and people spending. So it's finely balanced right now. I'm afraid the vote has affected sentiment very significantly, and now we're relying on the bank and hopefully the Chancellor to do something about it. The cost to the economy is still quite considerable, and I think this is something we're going to have to think about in the longer term. But in the short term, we absolutely need to reverse the sentiment that's gone downhill.
It's an ill wind that blows nobody any good, though, Vicky. The price of the top properties in London has begun to fall quite significantly. That's a good thing, no?
Well, yes, in a way, but of course, some of it was already happening. If we remember the stamp duty increases, the fact that second homes now have a stamp duty added to them, buy-to-let has also been hit. So, but yes, the richer homes have been declining for a while, but of course the low pound might actually encourage quite a lot more purchasing to take place. But yes, I think certainly most people are expecting London house prices to fall for the second half of this year and possibly to fall again next year. But what that means, I'm afraid, is that people feel less wealthy and they just won't go and spend as much as they would.
Sure, but it might help those who can't get into the property market to enter it.
Exactly.
Swings and roundabouts.
Yes, no, absolutely. And of course, it will be interesting to see what happens lower down the price range. And indeed, we may indeed have the situation where people find it easier to buy those houses. But what we've already seen is that mortgage approvals have been declining, and that is quite a worry, because it basically means that people are not particularly confident about their employment prospects and whether they'll be able to carry on paying even the much lower mortgage rates they have to pay now, and not just because of the latest cut, but we know that mortgage rates have been coming down quite significantly.
Indeed.
Yes, I think some people may find the situation is better for them, but on average, I think it's probably bad news.
Vicky Price, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much for interrupting your holiday and helping us with that. That's Vicky Price, economist and former joint head of the UK government's Economic Service. That on the back of the cut to 0.25% in Britain's interest rate and the possibility that it might be cut further. Of course, there isn't much left to cut. I'm fascinated by this UKIP story. A group of people that one had never heard of, fighting like ferrets in a sack over a position that almost certainly will be worth nothing at all, because the emergency general meeting that Nigel Farage and Aaron Banks and David Coburn and others are pushing for is obviously going to overturn the apple cart and perhaps fundamentally change UKIP in terms of its leadership for the future. But I find it hard to get excited about Mrs. A or Mr. B in the UKIP. It's amusing to see which is more right-wing than the other. But they're all unknowns to me, and I've been in politics all of my life. What do you think? And the Labour Party, where's Wally? Did we find him? We haven't. They're shaking their heads through the glass. There's an all-points alert for Wally. He's wearing a stripy jumper, you know, like the ones the burglars used to wear. Stripy jumper, stripy hat, Pfizer across the chest as his principal sponsor. If you see him, call me. What about Donald Trump? What are we going to do if he becomes the President of the United States? Well, my producer, Edward, who's a New Zealander, he and I have already staked out some claims down in the very south of the South Island of New Zealand as being perhaps the only safe place in the entire world to be there. John Le Boutillier, our American sage, he's prepared to come with us. So we're beginning to get a colony. It will be a kind of talk radio colony of refugees running away from Donald Trump. So tell me what you think on Trump. And I'm wondering how typical that fellow up in Liverpool was. That's the second week in a row that he's called me to say how much he agrees with me and Jeremy Corbyn, but to put the boot into Corbyn and support Owen Smith. I saw pictures on Monday of Jeremy's rally in Liverpool in the pouring rain, and tens of thousands of people were there in the pouring rain. He didn't even have to give out an ice cream cone to a single one of them. I've seen his rallies in Hull, in York. I've seen them in Brighton. He's a phenomenon, you know, Jeremy Corbyn. He's something that we haven't had in this country before. Labour is bigger than it has ever been in its entire history. It is the biggest Labour Social Democratic Party in the entire world, in the whole world. More than 600,000 people are now in it. It's now the richest party in Britain because of all that membership money. £50 million worth of membership money. And they say he's a failure, but hey, he's certainly packing them in. Or, as is now more often the case, he's having to have the rallies outdoors because there ain't no halls big enough to hold them. And he's not even that great a speaker. Let's face it. If he could speak like me, there'd be millions on the streets following him. But the point is, people know that he's a good and honest man, and that he's standing for the ordinary people and their interests, and that he's standing against war and for peace and justice and equality. That's why people are rallying to him. Bernie Sanders wasn't a great speaker either, but millions of people rallied to him because he too was a good and honest man who stood up for the interests of the ordinary people. And this is something that we haven't seen before. Jeremy Corbyn's not the Messiah. We don't touch the hem of his garment. He could be better on one or two things. He's more right than wrong, but he's not always right. But when you compare him to the political class that is so bankrupt in this country today, in which absolutely no one has any confidence or faith, then that's why Jeremy is drawing these numbers. And if these plotters and coup makers, this fifth column that exists inside the Labour Party, principally in Parliament but not entirely, working in concert with the mainstream media, then Jeremy would be in a very, very strong position indeed. And it's that we're going to be talking about. Robin Glasgow says, "Hi George, just want to thank you for the best show on British media of any kind. Talk radio is fast becoming the most relevant medium for discussion and information anywhere. Lang may your lum reek." Thanks for that, Rob. I'm in Scotland on Wednesday in Edinburgh at the Cameo for anyone who wants to come along and see me there. Trevor says, "Why would Corbynistas worry about the split? If Corbyn's so popular, all would follow, wouldn't they?" Well, the MPs wouldn't, Trevor. That's the point. Bev says, "I would have voted Bernie if he was the nominee. He really is something special in US politics." And someone says, though I can't actually read who it is, "If you aren't on Talk Radio, do it. The weekly dissecting of Owen Smith MP by George Galloway is too good. Maybe Hammersmith Andy will be back." That's Andy Slaughter that we woke up from his slumbers just last week. That's being referred to there. I just can't read who that is from. Let me see if I can. I can't. Let's take another caller. It's Andrew in the north of Ireland. Go ahead, Andrew.
All right, how are you, George?
I'm good, thanks. Good to hear from you.
Oh, it's absolute pleasure to speak to you as well. I've watched all your previous shows and watched all your YouTube videos in the past on TalkSport. Absolutely fantastic show you have at the minute.
Thank you.
Just like to speak to a couple of things about, the Labour Party. It's just an absolute farce, the whole thing, isn't it? Jeremy is probably the best thing that's happened to the Labour Party since the late and great Tony Benn in 1981. There's so much excitement, I think.
Yes, definitely.
By him in the last.
And Labour is winning elections. Did you see the result in Brighton East last night? An 11% swing to Labour in a Labour-held seat in Brighton under Jeremy Corbyn.
It's incredible, isn't it? Despite, all the plotting that's going on. By the
Since I sat down here at 7 o'clock, there has been virtually nothing on the television except attacks on Corbyn, Labour, Shami Chakrabarti, the peerage, the Israel lobby. They have been rolled out for an hour and 26 minutes that I have been sitting here. It is pure propaganda. It is nothing but propaganda on the mainstream media against Corbyn and against Labour. And still he's winning. And still the party's getting bigger.
I know, it's ridiculous. You've got people like, Laura Kuenssberg, who's one of his big sternest critics. He always reports anti-Corbyn stories. She's one of the sternest
And we're
critics
forced to pay for that. At least with Sky you can watch it or not. With Laura Kuenssberg, if you don't pay her wages, which are big by the way, you go to jail. You get sent to jail if you refuse to pay her wages in the BBC licence fee.
It's mad. And this candidate, Owen Smith, I never even heard of his name before the thing. It's ridiculous.
I was in Parliament at the same time as him, and I had never heard his name. If he had sat down next to me on the Clapham omnibus, I would have thought he was some soft shoe shuffler on his way to work in the City of London, which is effectively what he was doing.
The most ridiculous thing is, if he's so radical as Corbyn is and all those other, and many other people like him, why is Mandelson backing him?
Why is Peter Mandelson, Alistair Campbell, Tony Blair, why are they all supporting him? Why is all the right-wing media supporting him? Because he's left-wing as Corbyn? How utterly ridiculous. Utterly preposterous.
And what the ironic thing is? I don't think it's been mentioned yet, but their objective, they've put him in the first place, and now they were like, oh, we've made a mistake here, let's get rid of him. But he's so popular now that it's just impossible to do so.
Well, that's right. Nothing will ever be the same again. Thank you, Andrew, for that call. Your line began to get a bit ropey there towards the end, but I hope it didn't spoil the experience. People-Powered Corbyn says, a very sad set of affairs. when at a time when the UK is desperate for unity and socialism. Shere Khan says if we could sell intelligence to Trump, we'd be bankrupt. It's easy to instigate right-wing. Just repeat. And Matthew says the banking system isn't set up to benefit ordinary people. You know that, George. And Sarah says, I think it'd be a bit unfair to those of us who can't even manage to get on the housing ladder. That was in response to my idea of paying off everybody's mortgage. Of course, all the tenants and those that couldn't get on the housing ladder would have to be compensated in a different way. Go ahead, Alan.
How you doing, George?
I'm very good. Nice to hear from you. Go ahead, sir.
Now, listen, 2 points here.
Yeah.
I think Nigel Farage, right?
Yeah.
I think he was threatened, right?
You think what?
I think he was threatened.
Threatened? Oh.
Right? Now, that's 1 point, right?
What, do you think they've got something on him?
No, they've not got nothing on him, but they threatened him. I'd come to America. Right? Now,
Okay.
Right? We'll carry on with that one for a minute. Right?
Right.
Typical American way of doing things, by the way. Right?
House of Cards, you're thinking. You're thinking Francis Urquhart here.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. All right,
Right.
Go ahead.
And then Mr. Osborne goes over to America 2 weeks before the EU elections.
Uh-huh.
Right? He comes back. He looks like a white hanky, right? Just been put through the ringer, right? As if he's been told what to do when he was over in America.
Yes. And where is this going, Alan?
Well, some people might call it conspiracy theories and all the rest of it, George. Honestly.
Well, what was he told what to do, and what did he do? He's bagged. George Osborne got the sack.
I got the sack because at the end of the day, when they went to America, they were told by the Americans, you better do your best and threaten your people to vote yes to stay in.
Yeah, but the people decided otherwise. But I'm more intrigued. I mean, George Osborne is eminently forgettable. He's just about the most forgettable chancellor.
But you see the colour of him when they come back. He was as white as honestly, it's like a white hanky. I swear to you, George.
He always looked the same to me. White.
This is all due to the establishment, George.
No. All right. Okay. Thanks, Alan. It is a bit of a conspiracy theory, but Alan's view was that Farage chucked it because the Americans threatened him, and George Osborne's hanky was all white as a result of threats from the United States. Who knows? But it's a fair enough point of view. Let's hear from some of these SMSs. Hi, George, in your view, what happens to the Blairites when Corbyn's mandate is further bolstered? Do you think he should be as magnanimous as he was the first time around, or should he sharpen his own knife and get on with restoring the traditional values of the Labour Party? I'll come back to that in a minute. KPN says because people would be free of mortgage debt and state-sponsored financial oppression. You know, mortgage means death grip, right? It's the French word for death grip. If we freed millions of people from the death grip by printing the money and giving it directly to the banks to clear the mortgages, rather than just giving it directly to the banks and hoping, to use Vicky Price's word, hoping that it will find its way to small and medium-sized enterprises, I'm just saying it would lead to a gigantic boost in spending power. It's not the only way, of course. Just struck me as quite an imaginative way. Trevor Moore says, I'm angry, white and male, and Trump insults my intelligence. Does that count? Well said, Trevor. Tom Hearn says, George, you're right on Corbyn. The public appreciate honesty in politicians. It's scarce enough in this country. Scarce indeed. And Sarah says, I think you'd be an excellent leader of Scottish Labour. Well, Mr. Corbyn, take note. Boogie says, yeah, those angry white men are good and a frustrated voter for the Republicans, not as a candidate like Trump. Well, you see, the point is that the Republican Party used to be the party of the toffs. Now the toffs gaze upon the fountain of vulgarity that is Donald Trump and shudder. No toff, no educated, rich, Republican toff is going to have a spring in their step going into the polling booth to vote for Trump, who is some kind of candy floss monster. I mean, think of a giant candy floss with teeth and hate in its heart. That is Donald Trump. Now, the traditional toffs and rich people that supported the Republicans are deserting. All that's left is the angry white mass that has been betrayed and left in a kind of post-industrial desert by globalized capitalism under people like the Clintons and the Obamas, the elite who've governed for Wall Street rather than Main Street. And there's a lot of Americans in that boat. There's tens of millions of them. And if they all vote, especially in the big and important swing states, well, who knows what might happen. I said I'd go back to the texter who asked me what Jeremy Corbyn should do if and when he is re-elected as leader. I think it depends on the other side. If they say, all right, we had a go, then we had a second go, but the members have spoken, we must all now get shoulder to shoulder in the aid of the party, tackle the government, stand up for the workers, stand up for the pensioners, stand up for the children, stand up for the poor, and we must do it behind Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, then of course this whole matter can be brought to a close and can be just a sort of unmentioned secret. Like an embarrassing ant, it can be parked somewhere up the stairs and we don't mention it. But if they say, we're going to continue this war by other means, we're going to continue to undermine you at each and every turn, we're going to continue coordinating with the news bulletins, our attacks on you, our resignations, and so on, then there'll have to be a purge. Now, a purge is never a pretty sight, but it's better to purge now than to allow these people to continue their sedition, their subversion, their sabotage, all the way up to the general election. Better that this purge be begun if these people intend to continue as they have since last September. Now, I mentioned some names. You don't need to be Einstein to work them out. There are people, rent-a-gobs, that are on every news bulletin that will have them. I've been watching one or two of them this very evening. These rent-a-gob, I'm watching one right now. This, what's his name, Wes Streeting, a veritable boulevard of treachery, he is. A Champs-Élysées of betrayal, he is. This Wes Streeting is on the television right now, bitterly attacking Shami Chakrabarti, one of the most respected people in this country, just as a means of attacking Corbyn again. These people will have to go. These people will have to be purged. Now, if I'm back in the Labour Party, I'll help with that purge. I know a thing or two about purges. Now, earlier I was very unfair on Owen Smith. I compared him to the comic character Wally, as in Where's Wally, where you search amidst a sea of sameness and seek to find Wally. But Lord Murray Campbell, my goodness, the blue bloods are listening tonight. Lord Murray Campbell says, George, that's an insult to Wally's character. Well, I don't know, and, I'm a father, by the grace of God, of 3 young children, so I do a lot of Where's Wally. I'm not sure that he has a character. I'm not sure that he isn't just one-dimensional blandness. You get where I'm going with this, my lord? Now, Peter in Glasgow says, when you hear your economist floundering for any rational answers, George, you sure as sugar know we are in trouble. I'm going with your idea, says Peter in Glasgow. I'm just throwing it out, Peter, as an idea. You see, the point is, we are printing all this money. We're just printing it. Hundreds of billions of pounds. We're just printing it. It doesn't exist. We're only printing extra. We're keeping the presses running. So if the point of that is to kickstart economic activity, why not give it to people who you can guarantee will engage in economic activity with it, rather than give it directly to the banks and hope, in Vicky Price's words, that it somehow, by some alchemy, finds its way to small and medium-sized enterprises who will then invest it, i.e. spend it, on economic activity in Britain, and then somehow that too will trickle down. And for a more direct way, give every old-age pensioner in Britain £1,000 right now. Most of it will be spent in the local shops, local restaurants, given to grandchildren who'll spend it in local shops, on local things. You're not going to, £1,000, you're not going to be able to take off to the Bahamas with it, or invest it in Panama, in a tax haven. You're going to spend it. Now, that's actually a more direct way. If you're going to print the money, I mean, we were always told, oh, you can't just print money. There's no money tree. Remember when right-wing people used to argue that? Oh, here's the money tree again. Well, it turns out there is a money tree. And it has yielded hundreds of billions of pounds. But it hasn't done all that much good, has it? And then I had this other idea. If the concern is that the bank's stability has to be guaranteed through improving their reserves, if you paid everybody's mortgage off, well, that money goes directly to the bank. That's a boost to their reserves that you couldn't imagine. And everybody whose mortgage had just been paid off would now have hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds a month extra to spend. It's just an idea. Tell me what you think. Anyway, Guy in Newcastle under Lyme is on the line, and he's up next. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, hi, good evening, George. This week, BBC Two Newsnight, they were doing a feature on the Smith and Corbyn, the hustings, and they had 2 images in the background, 3 images in the background. 2 were Smith, and he looked pretty good. They were good, smart images. But the image he'd got of Corbyn, I looked at it and I thought, God, he looks dreadful. And I said to my partner, who's retired from the NHS after a career, what do you think? And she said, he looks like a bloke who's on a geriatric ward, who's near to death, extremely poorly. Now, am I being oversensitive about that? Or
No, you're not.
BBC's bias?
Well, no, you are right, but I wish Jeremy would smarten himself up. I wish he'd get a black suit and keep on wearing it, with a white shirt, and sometimes with a tie on it. I wish he'd get himself a waistcoat. I wish he'd get himself trousers that matched his jacket.
Yeah.
Know what I'm saying? I'm a working class Scottish guy, and I think that leaders should look like leaders.
Yeah, and I've seen him, and he does look smarter than what they portrayed him.
When he's in his suit, he looks great. He's handsome. He's like what's his name in the is it what's the famous Star Wars character? He looks Obi-Wan Kenobi with the distinguished white hair and the distinguished white beard. I think he looks like a real wise guy.
So you don't think as that's demonstrating
no, I do.
Towards Smith?
I do. I see pictures of Jeremy Corbyn all the time in the media, and I know that picture has been selected because it is not a flattering picture. Now, Alan Partridge, who's running against him, is so flimsy, so one-dimensional. I mean, he might as well be Wally on a page. Apparently we've found Wally, by the way, but the bad news is that we can't yet find Owen Smith. No offence or anything, Jeremy. I mean, I know the clothes that you've always liked to wear, but I think you should make a wee compromise here and there. And if you like, I'll be your shopper. I'm a mean judge of waistcoats and jackets and even, I'm talking vintage. I'm not talking new. I'm not saying that you should be, shopping in Harrods or Selfridge. I'll go into the vintage shops and I'll get you some cracking gear. Now, Guy, whom we lost, is still on the line. Guy.
Yeah, I'm still... George, the other story, again, is I think it demonstrates the bias in the coverage, and that why aren't we hearing about some Sam Cam stylist and the nomination for an honour?
It is it is an outrage, Guy. I can hardly contain my anger as I'm watching the traducing, the defaming of Shami Chakrabarti, one of the finest people on this island, because she got an honour, whilst David Cameron's hairdresser got, not even his hairdresser, actually, as you say, his wife's hairdresser got an honour. And no one's talking about it. No. George Osborne is a companion of honour. I mean, God save us. He's got the same gong as Winston Churchill got for wrecking the economy and getting sacked.
George, the last thing I'd like to say is I think that people who are interested in news are picking the news up off the internet, and I don't mean off weird websites. I mean, people are cutting and pasting interviews. They're going on to Twitter feeds, your feed, other union feeds, trade unionists, and the news is being spread, not privately, but without the use of the mass media.
That's right.
I think that's the way news is being circulated.
That's right. And ignorance is now a choice. Stupidity is now a choice. Because if you choose, you can know everything that's going on. You can surf all the different sources. You can suss what feels right and what doesn't. You can compare that with this. It's a choice to be ignorant nowadays. You have the possibility to know everything that you need to know. Let me deal with some more tweets. Ken McKay says, OS showed his true colour when he abstained on more cuts for the disabled. Well, that's a fact, you know. You see, Jeremy Corbyn forced the Tories to reverse their cuts to the disabled. But Owen Smith abstained. And now he's telling us he's just as radical as Jeremy Corbyn. But that ain't true. Whatever happened to Ken from the Highlands, by the way? Ken from the Highlands, are you out there? Why don't you call me? Mary Wollstonecraft says, how can coup MPs continue when their own constituency Labour parties don't support them? A rod for all our backs, allowing them to stay. It's true, I see Mike Gape's constituency. He's one of the worst rent-a-gobs against Corbyn. His constituency has just nominated Corbyn, and several others of the coup leaders have had the embarrassment of their constituencies choosing Corbyn. Sarah says, I think they wanted to try to remove Jeremy with Owen, and then they'd replace him with someone further right. And Rob says, Jez lets him off lightly. Smith knows you would hammer him. That's probably right. Get Frank Field instead. He seems to know plenty. Now, Frank Field, a very long-standing Labour MP for the Merseyside area. I think it's Birkenhead is his constituency. He was very frank. I saw his interview today. He was very frank, was Frank Field. He said, Owen Smith could not be elected on the policies he is currently espousing. So if he wins the leadership, he will have to change them back to a more mainstream Labour position. Well, out of the horse's mouth, I call that. Stephanie Kennedy says, what are your views on a cross-party anti-Tory alliance led by Jezza? I'm well in favour of that, Stephanie. Thanks for asking. Looby Dooby Doo says, this is very true. I can't believe the Parliamentary Labour Party haven't embraced this huge surge in support. It's unforgivable. Indeed, it is. And Canton Disraeli jokes, yes, we are going to get hundreds of thousands of votes at the general election. You see, the thesis that Jeremy Corbyn can't win the election is, of course, untested because he's never been given a chance. Neil Kinnock fought 2 general elections, was leader for 9 years, and was a rank, miserable failure, but is now venerated as some kind of sage. And Jeremy Corbyn got 10 months before they launched a campaign to overthrow him. All we know is that Labour was ahead of the Conservatives in the polls on the day before the coup was launched. All we know is that there have been 4 parliamentary by-elections since Corbyn became the leader, and Labour has won all 4 of them. 3 of them with a substantially increased majority. Only 1 of them, in Owen Smith's neighbouring constituency, was there a small drop in the Labour majority. Ever since Corbyn became the leader, his party has won the Bristol mayoralty, the London mayoralty. They've won council by-elections all over the country. They beat the Tories by 1 clear % in the council elections in May. And in the local elections, even in the midst of all this carnage, local by-elections, Labour is turning in fantastic results, as well as being the biggest it's ever been, as well as being the biggest Labour Party in the entire world. Well, I could go on. But Canton Disraeli, whoever he is, and I've just blocked him on my Twitter, is implying that Corbyn is a loser. I don't believe that. And moreover, there is no evidence to support that. Carlos says, it's more communist than socialist. It's all pie in the sky, all rhetoric, no policies. That's from Carlo. Leonard says, Blairites would much rather see a Tory government in any shape or form than a Corbyn-led government. That's true. In fact, Tony Blair himself said exactly that. Well, we're coming to the end of the second hour, which means there is 1 hour left to go, in which we are going to talk Trump. I'm going to interview the biographer of Donald Trump. Imagine me, a working-class boy from Dundee, getting once removed from Donald Trump. Now, what's wrong with a bit of power to the people? That's what I say. That's what I want this radio show to be. A university of the airwaves, free to air. And I want to assemble an all-star cast from the general public. Well, you say that, you big Egypt, you big strawberry-topped Egypt. You say that. But I just don't know whether you're real or not. I mean, are you an agent of the Clintons? Have you been infiltrated into the Republican Party with a view to throwing the election? Because, frankly, any Republican, anyone, could have defeated Hillary Clinton, except you. And it is extraordinary that this man who erupts not just daily but hourly with bile and hatred and prejudice and bigotry and racism, erupting hourly with a new group or set of people to insult, to traduce. It is incredible that he's even 10 points within the margin of victory over Hillary Clinton, explicable only by the fact that Hillary Clinton is a desperately bad candidate too. And so it was with pleasure that I learnt I was going to be interviewing Michael D'Antonio, who's the author of Never Enough, Donald Trump and the Pursuit of Success. And he joins me now. Michael, is Donald Trump summed up in that title, Never Enough? He just can't get enough money, enough women, enough political power?
Well, the main thing he can't get enough of is attention. That this is a fellow who burst onto the scene in New York City in the 1970s with his swaggering and bragging ways, and has pretty much demanded we all pay attention to him ever since. And there have been a lot of famous people who have come and gone, but Donald has remained center stage ever since that time.
It is enigmatic, that's true, because on the face of it, there doesn't seem to me to be very much to pay attention to. A braggart, a swaggart, not the Reverend Jimmy Swaggart, who was found behind the altar stealing money to pay for the hookers. I don't mean that, just for the avoidance of libel suits. But a braggart, a swaggering, boastful, not terribly successful businessman, that's all he is, isn't it?
Well, he's very good at promotion, and this is the thing that is sort of in stride, really step by step, with the changes in our culture, where there was a time when people really had to achieve something to gain attention and fame, and it usually had to be something good. But around the 1970s, and especially going into the 1980s, it became possible to be famous for being famous and to build an image. In his case, it was, I'm a fantastically wealthy guy, and I'm really handsome, and I've got all the toys and baubles that everybody wants, without much checking going on. People kind of decided they didn't care whether it was true or not. If it was a great story, they were going to pay attention. So you're right. He wasn't any more successful than, you know, your average real estate developer in New York City, and he wasn't even one of the bigger ones at that. But he managed to persuade people that he represented something big and profound and worth noticing, and it worked. Eventually, that in itself became a business for him. So the notion of being famous was converted to cash as he branded various projects and products, and people bought.
And put his name on everything, unusually.
Well, yes, and this was almost like a wolf marking his territory. Someone said to me recently, is he crazy, or is he crazy like a fox? And I said, actually, he's more wolf than fox. You know, wolves want to dominate, and they run in packs, and there's definitely a hierarchy with an alpha. Foxes are more solitary creatures. And as a wolf, Donald wants everyone to know where he's been, so he puts his name in giant gold letters, typically, on whatever he owns and on things that he doesn't own. It got so that he could sell his name, perhaps for $1 million a year. That was a typical arrangement. Put it on a building, but he didn't own it. It was actually owned and developed by someone else who liked the idea of an association with Trump.
Oh, my goodness.
And this was, well, the idea was to appeal mostly to nouveau riche people. He wasn't going for the folks who would be accustomed to staying at the Ritz-Carlton or some other the Georges Cinq in Paris. He was going for the person who wanted to buy a little bit of glitz and gold-colored glamour, if not actual gold.
Is it true? Yeah, of course. Is it true, Michael, that if he'd put the money that his father left him in the bank and never turned up for work a single day, he'd have been richer than he actually is after all these decades of flailing around in business enterprise?
I think close. Again, we don't know precisely what Donald's worth. He has this way of making claims that cannot be verified. So if he says he's worth $10 billion, but he's operating completely behind closed doors and with no public reporting, there's no way to confirm or knock down that claim. So he might be worth 10, he might be worth $2 billion. And certainly if it's at the low end, many people have done the figuring, and they've realized that if he had started with $200 million in 1970, which was about the amount that his father was worth, and just left it there, he might be worth more than $2 billion today. And we would have all been spared all of this flailing around. And the thing that people forget is he went through at least 4 corporate bankruptcies. Thousands of people lost their jobs. Many millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars were lost in Trump stock and bonds. And he walked away from contractors who were owed money. Companies in Atlantic City that had been in business for generations went bankrupt because Trump didn't pay them. So this is not a victimless endeavor.
No.
He's left a trail of broken businesses and ruined financial arrangements for people all across the country.
So we've dealt with the never enough attention, never enough money. What about women? Has he had a lot of wives? He seems to like the Eastern European wife.
Well, yes, he's on his second Eastern European wife. His first one was from the former Yugoslavia, and so is the third. He made a deviation with his second spouse. It's a woman who is more out of the American football cheerleader school of beauty. She's very buxom and blonde and blue-eyed and was kind of every 13-year-old boy's ideal woman. And that was Marla Maples, who he left his first wife for.
Okay.
But in many ways, these women are decorations for him. I can't even use the language that he uses to talk about women on the radio, but he speaks of women as if they're products.
Yes.
And how they look on his arm is pretty much all that matters. I met his current wife just once, and she entered the room and actually really kept her distance from Donald, and he begged her to tell me that he was a great husband. Tell him I'm a good husband, babe. Tell him. And she kind of begrudgingly said, well, he's a good husband.
Now, is he, I mean, I know it was unauthorized, your biography, Michael, but is he angry about it? Do you know?
Well, I know he sent a lawyer to try to intimidate me, so I don't think he's pleased with the book. He did actually cooperate for some time. We did 5 interviews, and when he discovered I spoke to one person who was on his enemy list, that was enough, and he cut me off there. But he's not happy. What's really funny, though, is the attorney called me and was giving me a hard time and said, we don't like the title. And I said, well, Michael, when was it ever enough for Donald? And he started to laugh. And he said, well, actually, I don't think the title's so bad. Because anyone who's been within 10 feet of Donald knows that there's never enough of anything for him. The one thing that he's not too keen on, though, and this is kind of interesting, is art, and he's not much of a food guy. If you give him a McDonald's hamburger, he's happy. He doesn't have really refined taste in that way.
You don't surprise me with that. Try one more.
I don't surprise you with that?
No. I never would have thought otherwise. Look, we're running out of time, and it's a fascinating conversation. Michael, let me just ask you one question and a quick answer. Is there going to be a President Trump?
Absolutely not. The American public will buy a lot of things, but they're not going to buy him as President of the United States.
I hope you're right. Michael D'Antonio, author of Never Enough, a fantastic conversation and a great book, I understand. I look forward to reading it. Thanks very much for joining us on Talk Radio.
Thanks, George.
Well, I mean, Donald Trump is the epitome of vulgar 21st century capitalism, isn't he? Famous for being famous, as Michael just said. Famous for nothing, really. I mean, his father left him $200 million. I mean, you're going to be brash and ugly. You're going to be this fountain of vulgarity of which I speak. The point is, why do other people pay attention? Why is there any interest in this man whatsoever? Because if there hadn't been that interest, he wouldn't be running for president. And if he wasn't up against Hillary Clinton, we wouldn't have anything to worry about, because he would have no chance at all. But that ain't the case, because he is running against Hillary Clinton. Two monsters are fighting each other. How many people in America? Is it 139 million? Did I see that figure today? And it boiled down to those two? To Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump? Is that the best that they can do? John Fallon says, no, I can't read that one out. Human Rights for All says, one of the reasons why I love Fridays. I've got that. Mary Finlay says, up benefits. That would give 3 million women their pensions back. It would all go straight into the economy. Let's see, from Leonard. No, I've actually read all of those already, so let me take a break for some capitalist messages. Still looking for Owen Smith, but haven't found him yet. But on the line is a real legend, Damien in Brighton, where I'm going to be, Damien, on Monday night. I hope you'll be there.
I know. Yes, I will.
Excellent. Go ahead.
George, first of all, very quickly, congratulations to Lloyd Russell Moyle, who's just won his seat in East Brighton in the by-election. He won.
It was a phenomenal result, that, you know, in the midst of all this carnage.
Exactly, George. He won over half of the vote and 300% more votes than the Conservative candidate. So
much for Corbyn's Labour being unelectable.
Well, the reason I'm phoning, George, and you're always very generous with your time to me, and I appreciate that. I intend to cover quite a lot of ground this evening. I'll do it as concisely as possible. And I'd like to talk about the position of Ian McNicol, the General Secretary of the Labour Party.
Yeah, he's right in the middle of this coup, if you ask me.
Well, George, in order for a party to win a general election, I'd argue that it's got to achieve 4 things. It's got to secure and increase the base, which Mr Corbyn has achieved. It's got to demonstrate electoral success, and it's got to prove that it's an effective opposition. So, one, every single by-election, increased share of the vote in the council elections, forced 22 U-turns from the Conservatives, more U-turns in 10 months than the entire last Parliament.
That's right, in 5 years.
Correct. Now, the third thing it's got to have is got to have the right offer for the public at the right time. I believe that Mr Corbyn has that offer for the public of the UK to place their interests first. But lastly, George, and this is where we get to Mr McNicol. Now, this is possibly the most important aspect of winning a general election, and that is a party must present a united front. And regarding that united front, there are two key relationships in a political party. The first relationship is between the leader and the shadow chancellor, and the second relationship is between the leader and, in the case of the Labour Party, the General Secretary of the Labour Party. Now, the first relationship is beyond question, and the second relationship is beyond repair. The reason I say that, George, is Mr McNichol attempted to block Mr Corbyn from appearing on the ballot. He is currently engaged in a legal case to discriminate against 130,000 Labour Party members. And the sole beneficiary of his discrimination is Owen Smith. Now, as Mr McNichol is the returning officer for this contest, he's clearly in breach of his duty of impartiality. And the other thing is the legal aspect to this, George. Now, Mr McNichol is putting the High Court Judge, Justice Hinklebottom, in a very difficult position because his justice will be averse, of course, to being involved in a party political dispute. But
sure, but when you're dealing with 130,000 aggrieved members, the judge might well go their way.
Well, the problem is that what Mr McNichol is asking the judge to condone is to set a precedent which the British legal, the British law is based upon precedents, and he's asking him to condone, to allow contracts to be abandoned post-completion, George. Now, the judge is simply not going to do that. Now, the outcome, I believe the decision that he leaves his justice no choice. He cannot invoke a state of anarchy by allowing people to abandon contracts. So the outcome of that is that the 130,000 members will be allowed to vote.
I believe that. I've believed from the very start on that one, Damien, that in fact the people who joined the Labour Party on that basis, and that's 130,000 of them, would be having their contract with Labour, which had been consummated by the transfer of money in the payment of membership fees, their contract would be breached, and the law cannot allow that.
Which they have been paying on a regular, if people are paying on monthly, if they can't afford to pay the full amount, have been paying on monthly payments for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Now, that decision, George, is going to have some major impacts on the Labour Party. One, it's going to make Mr McNichol's position untenable, and secondly, it's going to signal the end of Mr Smith's campaign.
I feel, well, you're on the same page as me, Damien. I said at the beginning of the show that if the judge comes down in favour of the 130,000, Smith will have to chuck it, because it is then almost certain not only that Corbyn wins a landslide, but that he wins a landslide so big that it utterly humiliates and calls into question the very sanity of those who provoked this election campaign in the first place.
Precisely, George. Now, there's one other thing that I would like to say, because I agreed with your analysis of the actual purpose of Mr Smith's standing. He never had a hope in hell of winning, so I agree with your analysis. And I would just like to give, I think, fair warning from the membership side that there are mechanisms for the Labour Party if when Mr Corbyn is returned as the leader of the party, if there are Labour MPs who continue to sabotage the Labour Party, they should be in no doubt that the leadership would be well within its right to withdraw the whip, and that the membership will target them for either reselection when the boundary changes happen, or deselection at the next general election. And that is a guarantee from the membership, George.
And some of them need expelling. They have brought the Labour Party into disrepute, and there needs to be some examples made of the worst offenders, in my view. But that's not for me to decide. But the Last question I've got for you, Damien. You talked about key relationships, but you didn't mention the key relationship of the leader of the party to the deputy leader of the party. That's another crisis that's going to open up, isn't it?
Mr. Watson is on very thin ice. He is a serial plotter against Labour Party leaders, and a period of prolonged silence from Mr. Watson would be most welcome, George.
Damien in Brighton, a wonderful call. That's why he's one of our legends, you see, because he knows what he's talking about. He can articulately express it. He's a plain man, but he's an educated and highly intelligent man. And that's the kind of men and women I want to encourage here on the mother of all talk shows. Carlo's back on. Corbyn's far from a phenomenon, as you'll find out in a general election. He'll be wiped out. Well, the last guy was wiped out, and Gordon Brown was wiped out before him, so he wouldn't be alone in that. Neil Kinnock, who's never off his back, he got wiped out twice. So losing an election is not the end of the world, Carlo, but losing your soul very definitely is. Now, someone imaginatively entitling himself "The Jocks Lost It" says, why just OAPs? They love to save for a rainy day. Well, we have to find a way of recycling this money tree money instead of just giving it to the banks in the hope that they'll do something productive with it. Isn't that really the point? Stephen McHardy says they'd spend it in Spain. Well, it's true you would have to take some precautions in my financial world. But again, I'm just making the point that if you're printing fake money and giving it out, wouldn't it be better to give it out to the people than the bankers? The bankers who got us into this mess in the first place? Just saying. Look, I'm George Galloway. This is the mother of all talk shows, and I've just got half an hour left before I can return to the bosom of my family. I'm getting more and more angry as I'm looking at the screens around me at the gigantic meal that is being made of the elevation, if that be the best way to describe it, to the House of Lords of Shami Chakrabarti, the head of liberty, the leading champion of civil rights and human rights in our country, a young woman of colour, a lawyer, an articulate woman that you'd put on any platform, any show, that would never let you down, that's a credit to our country, has been given a seat in the House of Lords. This is a House of Lords filled with expenses thieves, people that have burned down hotels and gone to prison. Jeffrey Archer, sent to prison for 5 years for perjury. Lords a-leaping into jail for the theft of public funds. Thieving lords and ladies, stealing from the public purse. This is a House of Lords which still contains the residual putrefying corpses of the English aristocracy, swept off the grouse moors, occasionally to grace the corridors of power in the House of Lords. This is a House of Lords filled with useless make-weights, flatmates, chums, people they wanted to get out the way so someone else could get their seats, superannuated, mediocre parliamentarians. That's the House of Lords. Jeremy Corbyn puts just about the only person worthy of being there into the House of Lords. and it's been running the entire night on the news channels. Whilst David Cameron gave knighthoods, peerages, companionships of honour to some of the most mediocre and indeed absurd recipients of modern times. Not since Harold Wilson's Lavender List has there been a more ridiculous group of recipients. Now, I mentioned George Osborne. He's a companion of honour. The Queen's companion of honour. Well, don't tempt me to talk more about his honour. Don't tempt me to talk about why Her Majesty might find that companionship a little rum. Let me just talk about his public life. He's sacked as the Chancellor of the Exchequer after wrecking the British economy. And his reward is to be elevated to the ranks of the likes of Winston Churchill. Or we could mention Mrs. Cameron's stylist. I'm not making this up. The Prime Minister gave a gong, an award, to the woman who helped Mrs. Cameron look nice when she went out and cut her hair. Now, she did look nice, Mrs. Cameron. I'll grant you that. I doubt very much if she needed much in the way of styling. She seemed quite a stylish person to me in the first place. And the taxpayer paid that stylist. I forget the number now, but it was something ridiculous, like £50,000 or £60,000 a year to that stylist, paid by the taxpayer. And now that same stylist gets an award, and I haven't seen it once here on any of these screens. I haven't seen or heard a puff from the critics now assailing Corbyn for just about the best nomination for a member of the House of Lords in my lifetime. I cannot think of a more worthy recipient than Shami Chakrabarti. It's just, you see, a stick. It's a stick to beat Corbyn, and any stick will do. Let me read some of the traffic that's coming in. David and Harvey appears to be a hound, says, it's always trickled down, isn't it? What a coincidence, it helps all the filthy rich. Let's do trickle up instead. Very good point. Phil says, and don't forget Trident, George. They will never be able to say there is no money ever again. Well, that's true. By the way, you've still got time to call me, 0844 499 1000. You see, there is a money tree, isn't there? There is a money tree. There's a money tree to print hundreds of billions of pounds and give it to the banks in quantitative easing. There's a money tree to expend hundreds of billions of pounds on a new fleet of new nuclear weapons that could only be used as an act of national suicide, could only be used as the last act that any of us would ever perform before our country was incinerated and its people wiped off the face of the earth. There's money for that. There's money for going around the world setting fire to other people's countries. But there's no money to keep our old age pensioners warm in the winter time. Go figure. Now, don't take this the wrong way, but I need a woman to phone me, because I haven't had a woman caller and I really don't want to go through an entire show without hearing a woman's voice on the line. Plenty of people are texting and tweeting me, though. Michael Nixon says, perhaps paying people decent wages with annual pay rises would stimulate the economy too. And of course that is absolutely correct. Now, my point about the mortgages was that they say that they have to help the banks stabilise their position and build up their reserves. So, mortgages are mainly debts from people to banks. So if the government used the money tree to pay off their mortgages, and that money then went straight into the bank is thus preserved, its stability preserved, its reserves fantastically enhanced with new fake money. But the person who no longer has to pay the mortgage is quids in, hundreds, maybe thousands of quids in every month, and they'd spend it. And if they spent it locally in Britain on British things, it would fantastically boost the economy. Now, here's someone who SMSs, I don't have a name for them, but they know who they are. And this is true, actually. He or she says, Trump no longer makes me laugh. He makes me afraid. Very, very afraid. It's a very good point, I must say. Samuel in Nuneaton says, hello, George. As there won't be much of a choice between the lesser of the two evils regarding the US presidential election, do you envisage any significant changes with Britain's relationship with the US under the presidency of either of these two candidates? Well, look, I believe in the special relationship. I believe that we are two countries divided by a common language, with a common language, many common points of culture, certainly a common history. We once colonized that land, and then they fought us for their independence, and then they committed genocide against the original people there. Then they built up a state on the foundation of mass slavery, which was followed by apartheid and segregation, which continues to this day. And you see it on every news bulletin that isn't attacking Jeremy Corbyn, has a picture of a white policeman shooting dead a black person, now increasingly women, in the United States. So the United States is in a very big mess. And if you'll forgive me, I don't want to get too close to them, because, frankly, there's increasingly little in common that I feel with them, whatever their language, whatever their culture. And just to make the point that I'm not talking about the changing demography, Donald Trump is half Scottish. Can you believe it? I can. There are such people in Scotland as Donald Trump. Mark says, I can't believe Chakrabarti has made it to the Lords. What about Karen Brady? Katie Hopkins? It's a travesty. Katie Hopkins didn't get anything in Cameron's honours, did she? Surely not. But Karen Brady's already in the House of Lords. You know Karen Brady off The Apprentice, that made her fortune selling crotchless underwear and vibrators to the nation, and made Ann Summers a high street name, and helped those fine fellows that own West Ham get their hands on the Olympic Stadium. You can't say she's not a force to be reckoned with. As far as I know, no one attacked her elevation to the House of Lords. Or what about that Mrs. Mone, Baroness Mone, the inventor of some class of lift-up bra? She's in the House of Lords. Nobody's saying a word about it. Chakrabarti is the most qualified member of the House of Lords in living memory, certainly in my memory. I cannot think of a more appropriate member of the House of Lords. And she's being slandered on every channel because it's a means of hitting Jeremy Corbyn with just another stick. Full steam, says the new Labour politicians are merely false prophets, claiming to be from the left, but happy to sell out for votes. And another tweeter says, Corbyn gives hope to those who dare to hope this country should not be in this state in this day and age. It's absolutely right. Here's one of my regulars, John in Motherwell. John, welcome.
How you doing, George?
I'm good.
I have to apologise, George. I missed the first kind of half hour of your show.
Oh, don't worry. You can catch up on the podcast.
I will do. Listen, George, I caught you talking about Donald Trump. For me, looking at it, George, not as an American, obviously, but for a guy for Motherwell, it's a circus of distraction. Donald Trump, is Donald Trump the best that the Republicans can come up with?
Well, I made this point that there's 150 million or something of them, and it's boiled down to Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. You couldn't credit that, could you?
It's crazy. It's crazy. To me, as an observer of it, it just shows you that it comes down, the presidency comes down to one thing, and that's money, and whose pocket you're in.
Yeah.
I mean, the people, they wanted change, the change that Obama failed to deliver, and I'm assuming Americans are just scunnered with more of the same. So Trump will appeal to an element who think this guy will bring about a change that they're looking for.
Yeah. He's part of this worldwide phenomenon of rejection of the political class, isn't he? Of the establishment.
Yes.
Even though he's filthy rich and all that, he's not in that sense. He's tainted by many things, but he's not tainted by the record of these people who've been in power for all these generations.
Absolutely, and to me, that little spark there is what appeals to so many people. Hence, why the momentum. But it comes down to the media. People know the mainstream media has got its issues, as do many medias across the planet. But they look at Donald Trump and they see change. And the American people, from my opinion, as an observer, they want change, as do the people within the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And, you look at Jeremy Corbyn, a guy that actually a guy with a bit of salt about him. He's been pulled down. He's been tackled from within, and that shows cracks within party politics.
Yeah.
As a whole. And
you're right. I mean, the Brexit vote, the rise of Corbyn, the rise of the UKIP, the rise of Farage, the rise of Trump, and the rise of Le Pen in France with the National Front there, the rise of Wilders in the Netherlands. These are all left and right. Sanders, of course. These are left and right rejections erupting against the prevailing orthodoxy.
Yes. Yep. And there's no solid answer, George. But I thought a representative of the people should be a representative of the people.
Yeah.
Not decided based on how much money can fund a campaign.
Yeah, no, you're right, absolutely right.
The leader of a free world,
That
is the scary thing.
Thanks a lot, John in Motherwell. Last caller then is Jonathan in North East London. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Hey, good to hear from you. Looking forward to the Olympics tonight. What I find pretty amusing is that we've got another situation in the Labour Party where the chap that was elected to, get people supposedly is trying to be moved on by his own party. We had this with Tony Blair and then being replaced by Brown, and of course the whole country went, well, we didn't vote for Brown. And now we've got Corbyn that most of the country did vote for because they were allowed to have a vote by paying a couple of quid to the Labour Party. And then the Labour Party goes, oh, well, we don't really want Corbyn anymore. The MPs try and force him out.
Well, what about the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister of Britain was elected by 199 people.
Same situation again. It's frankly laughable that we have one of supposedly the most respected democracies in the world, and yet the actual leadership of the major parties, the public has no say in it. But then the Labour Party, supposedly their MPs don't even have a say in this at the moment.
Now,
So
I
it's
detect a
affecting us,
certain, I detect a certain Antipodean twang in your accent. Would I be right?
Oh, I've got a bit of a mixed heritage going on.
I'm just thinking that you are Australian, because I was going to make the point that, of course, these things happen regularly in Australia. In fact, in the Labour Party.
I've actually got, my parents are from New Zealand, but I'm actually English, yeah.
Okay, but I was just making the point that in the Labour Party in Australia, three
leaders in the space of about 2 weeks, wasn't it?
Yes, precisely. Jonathan, thanks for the call. I appreciate it very much indeed. Coming to the end, let me try and get through some of the written material that is come my way. Mark Corbett says, build social housing, train people to build and maintain. It will generate £2 for every pound spent, minimum. Well, that's certainly what we would do if we had a socialist country, Mark. In a capitalist country, that cannot be allowed. JK says that's perfect. About Trump, by the way, my reference to him being a fountain of vulgarity, famous for being famous and for no other reason. JK says that's perfect. He's a walking reality TV show, Kim Kardashian, but with less self-awareness and class. Oh, that's got to be the tweet of the night. Josie says Corbyn gives hope. I've read that one already. Someone else tweets, let them split. We know what they are. Tell them to shut the door on the way out. And Anti-Hasbara, that's not Anti-A-U-N-T-I-E, that's A-N-T-I-Hasbara, says, can they do that without constituency support? Is it legal? Surely they'll just be deselected. Well, none of us really know what's coming next in the Labour Party, because we cannot know what's in the heart of Mandelson and Campbell and Blair and the others who are pulling the strings in this great convulsion which is taking place in the Labour Party. We know that the mass of the people will support the elected leader Corbyn. At least all indications are that they will. But what we don't know is how the others will respond, how those with the millions will respond, how the millionaire media will respond. I believe that Labour is headed for some kind of organic disruption or rupture. Just saying. Miguel says, I would call your talk radio if I had anything constructive to say, but you are saying it all. How very kind. And Wimble says, Frank Field, Hard Talk, admitted supporting Owen Smith on the expectation he'd change his political positions if he wins. And Philip Hutchinson says, we must allow the 130,000 people to vote. It is a travesty that will not be forgotten. Travesty indeed. This is 130,000 people who joined the Labour Party and signed a contract with the Labour Party, which promised them that they could vote in leadership elections. And then, by a narrow majority, the Labour National Executive withdrew that offer and told them that they were keeping their money, but they weren't going to allow them to vote in leadership elections. And I believe that the court will find in favour of the 130,000. And then that'll really be curtains for the Blairites. Bradbury Pound. That's a good issue. Why not nationalise the banks and issue as national credit our own interest-free money, just like the Bradbury Pound? Well, we don't have time to open up the Bradbury Pound now, but hey, I absolutely agree with you. And Nav says if they can win their by-elections, then we'll see if it is the person or the party. Well, I've been here before, you see. I was here when the SDP split from the Labour Party in the same kind of wrecking manoeuvre. And one minute they had dozens of MPs who had defected from Labour. And every single one of them went down to defeat, standing under their new colours in their own constituencies at the subsequent general election. I've been around this track so many times.